Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit, and always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey everyone, happy January. Believe it or not, we made it to 2024 despite the craziness of the last couple of years. So just want to thank my sponsors for making these podcasts possible. Health Code, Get Health, GETHLTH.com. Great shakes. They helped me get through the holidays, helped some of my family and friends and tons of my patients get through. If you're struggling with not being able to put on weight, if you're one of those rare people in the world, we're using it to help put muscle mass on people. And also for people who are going through surgery, can't eat, this is the healthiest thing you can do to stay nutritionally sound. Also, they have a 20-year shelf life on some metal packs that they're doing for us, those of us who think the economy is going to go crazy and we have to have an emergency kit just in case. So Health Code, they have the vanilla chocolate macadamia. You can make tons of recipes from it, and it is nutritionally sound. I'm recommending it a lot to my seniors who are struggling with memory issues and trying to get them on a low carb ketogenic diet and have sound nutrition. So that's my plug. I love these guys. They're a great company, great people, and they even have a vegan option now for people who are choosing that path of eating. So please get health. And also Keto Mojo, I've been using them a lot. I was away from home and did not bring my Keto Mojo, and I was bummed because I did a couple of longer fasts and changed my diet a little bit, and I wanted to see the results. And guess what? This guy who's sponsored by Keto Mojo left it at home. So I will be grabbing it as soon as I get back home, and we'll be checking my ketones. They're a great company, a lot of great resources there, to get back on track after the holidays. So Keto Mojo, keto-mojo.com. Thank you both for sponsoring this episode, and thank you for your continued support. Here's to 2024, everyone. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. I haven't been deplatformed from YouTube for at least a couple months, so I thought I would just bring someone as a ringer just to see if we can make it happen. Dr. Ken Berry, welcome, man.
Hey, Doc. Good to be with you again.
Man, good to see you. You're just writing book after book. I can't keep up. I'm like, did you write this book? Tell everyone all the books you've written so far.
Well, Lies My Doctor Told Me was the original. And then Kim Howerton and I wrote a book called Common Sense Labs, which people are finding super helpful. And then I got together with my buddy Zane Griggs, and we wrote a book called Kicking Ass After 50.
Yeah, awesome.
Can I say ass? Did I get you kicked off YouTube again? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's all right, man. I'm getting used to it. We're old friends now. So yeah, I didn't know about kicking ass over 50, man. Since I'm barely over 50. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Zane is a fitness trainer in Nashville, and he's 53 and looks like he's 40. And I've just turned 55 and look like I'm 53. And very, very young looking.
I turned 54 and look like I'm 58, so I'm trying to catch up with you guys, man. Maybe if I listen to your book, I can.
Yeah. It's like, I think there's a book here. We should get together, you from the fitness angle, me from the nutrition and medicine, and let's write a book about this, because so many guys, they're 50, 55, 60, and they're the best looking thing in the house is the recliner.
Yeah.
Dude, get out of the recliner, get off the sofa. What are you doing? You've accumulated this lifetime of wisdom and experience. You should be kicking ass right now, not laying on your lazy ass. And so that's kind of where the idea germinated, and now there's this book, and there's an Audible. We met in Nashville and recorded it in a really nice studio, and so yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I think that's it. So I see so many people that, they're in their 80s and 90s and they're still, playing pickleball and doing stuff. And other people are in their 42 and they go, oh, no, I can't get off the couch. They're watching
Yeah.
Oprah and,
Yeah.
The View or something like that. But, so many of us have bought into that. So, yeah, let's cut back into this. And a lot of the stuff, happily, that we've been talking about, we're having these great experts coming out when we're talking about as we get older, what are we concerned about? Mental disabilities, Parkinson's disease, depression, anxiety, and stress, and all these things, cancer. So it's like, how do we decrease our risk of those things? So that may be a good starting point for us.
Yeah. Well, I think there's um, copious amounts of evidence in the literature already that is either just ignored or not known about by the majority of primary care healthcare providers. Hyperinsulinemia, as you know, is intimately related with virtually everything you just said, from Alzheimer's to Huntington's to glioblastoma to acne to fatty liver to obviously prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, hypertension. Literally every one of these things is intimately linked in multiple well-done research studies in the literature. But yet, and that's why Kim Howerton and I wrote the book Common Sense Labs, was because I basically got tired of hearing people say, my doctor says I don't need a fasting insulin. They don't even understand why I would want that. And it's like, and so, part of what I do with the making videos and writing books, I have to do a ton of research. And often that's in archaeology, anthropology, paleoanthropology, but it's increasingly also in the history of medicine. And when you go back and you start looking back in the teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, it's come up multiple times where it's become very popular and several times almost accepted as self-evident that if you're pre-diabetic, diabetic, you need to cut out the farinaceous foods, grains, and the saccharine food, sugar. And then, back then they couldn't even measure insulin. But they suspected maybe it's not just the hyperglycemia, the blood sugar. There's got to be something else going on here. And I think you can see that with the SGLT2 inhibitors that, basically make you pee out the glucose. Well, that makes your insulin come down. And now you're seeing all of these, and you can see doctors are just stumped. Like, how does this
and it raises the
heart failure?
And it raises the LDL cholesterol too, right, Ken?
Yeah,
it raises the LDL.
And it really doesn't lower you wouldn't see that much, but it lowers your insulin level drastically.
And your cardiac risk.
Exactly. But how does it lower cardiac risk? How does it improve kidney function? It's because it's lowering your insulin. And so just that kind of stuff that the average healthcare provider, they're just oblivious to this stuff. And it's not that they're evil. It may be not even that they're lazy. They just haven't bumped into the right thing, the right nidus that said, you should look into this, kind of like you and I did, way back before we had our moment of waking up. I was the guy that was telling you that, join the gym and join Weight Watchers. Get off your lazy butt. Quit eating all the time.
Never skip breakfast. Right.
Eat more, eat less. Yeah. Have whole grain bread. All that foolishness. I wasn't evil. I'm still lazy, but that was not the cause. I just didn't know better. And I think that's the case. And you see people every day bumping up against this. Like, how could my doctor, who I look up to and respect, how could they not know about fasting insulin? How important of a test that is. I don't get it. How can they not know that? They went to medical school. And I'm like, and so I keep telling people, doctors are just dudes and chicks, just like you and me. They have blind spots. If they haven't been exposed to something, then they can't possibly know about it. They haven't been exposed to it. And so the average doctor thinks that they were taught the gospel in medical school, right? I thought that. You thought that. But then all of a sudden, here's this growing movement of keto, ketovore, carnivore. Carnivore's crazy right now, right? Everybody's looking into it. And all these doctors are popping off on Twitter going, what is this foolishness about eating fatty meat? I don't get it. Why would you even, how could a doctor even think that that's healthy? It's
Well, the
all,
amazing thing is, yeah, the amazing thing on that is you look at like I had a collection of collecting all these old medical books that are sitting right next to me here, and you look
yeah,
in there, it's like, how did they manage diabetes back before they had insulin, right? They were
yeah,
saying, yeah, they couldn't even measure sugar levels. All they did was have you pee on the ground to see if ants come up, and they go, oh, let's see what happens,
or
and they say,
taste
well,
it.
or taste it, yeah, or taste it, right? Those are man. I'm glad we're in the era we're in. At least we have lab tests, but
Yep,
then they go, oh, okay, just give them meat and see what happens. Oh, they stop peeing sugar. That must be better.
yep.
The worst part was in the first days, they said, all these people are dying. They pee out all the sugar and they die. We should give them more sugar. And that they did. They tried that and killed off half the people who had diabetes at that time, you know? So that's why it's so important to know the history of medicine and not saying this is this newfangled crazy fad. These guys were all doing it. You look at Osler and all the greatest leaders in medicine, that's exactly what they were doing. And when you show the doctors the book, they don't know what to do with that information, right?
Right. And most doctors are not avid fans of medical history. They want to know what's the most modern medicine. What's the latest FDA approved thing? What should I be prescribing? I don't want the pharmacist to think that I'm a Luddite, right? I want to be prescribing the latest thing. It never occurs to them. Maybe I should look into the medicine's past. So many of the doctors, so many times, the two methods that kept coming up by about every 40 years would be fasting the patient and feeding them high fat, adequate protein, very low carb diets. That's come up multiple times in medicine, about every 40 years, 50 years. And indeed, some of the earliest experts in diabetes, that's how they treated their patients before you could check, definitely before you could check a fasting insulin, but even before you could check you'd have to go to a university hospital to get your glucose level checked. Like, it was a big deal, very expensive to do that. They would just fast the patient until they could check in the urine, see what was going on. They would just fast them until the urine didn't taste sweet anymore. And then they would start them back on fatty meat, eggs with the yolk. And then also, even when they would tell them it was okay to eat greens, they had to boil the greens 3 times. Boil them, pour off the water, boil and pour off the water to get rid of all the excess carbohydrates, right? All the starches that broke down in the water, you had to pour that off like it was a poison almost, like it was a slow poison for a diabetic. And so then all of a sudden, here comes insulin, that big invention, which is a huge invention. Yes, absolutely. But then they're like, let them eat what they want. We'll just match it with the insulin. And that's literally how they said it, just like doctors today say it back in the 1930s and 40s. Just match it with insulin.
And back then, they couldn't tell the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes like we
Right.
can now. Also, are you making insulin or not? And that's why
Right.
the testing that you're talking about, getting into your book, like what do you think, Ken, are the most important lab tests we can get? If you go, look, this patient can only afford four labs, what are you going to
Yeah.
get?
Yeah. So if I could only get just a small handful of labs, I honestly don't care much about a blood sugar, because it doesn't give me the full picture, right? You can be a hardcore carnivore, haven't looked at a carbohydrate in 6 months, your blood sugar might be 115. It's irrelevant, right? Or you might have just finished an entire box of Fruit Loops with chocolate milk last night, and your glucose be 60. Literally doesn't really help me at all. I want to know what your A1C is, hemoglobin A1C. I want to know what your fasting insulin is. I want to know what your triglycerides are. I want to know what your HDL cholesterol, HDLC is. I want to know what your CRP is. Those are probably the 5 tests. If that's all I could get on somebody, those are the 5 tests that I would want as far as metabolic health goes.
Yeah, amen. And I would say the same. That those are the tests that, like, exactly what I was thinking is what you said, right? And then maybe throw in a good thyroid panel and see where you're at, like if you're struggling
Yeah,
with
yeah. If
weight
they're having
and
symptoms,
lipids and all that
absolutely.
stuff. So
Sure.
yeah, it's amazing how we just jump on this bandwagon. And for me, I would love to hear your wake up moment. But for me, obviously, hearing about Jason Fung and fasting, and I sort of reached out to him and he helped me out a lot. And then Ivor Cummins was talking about insulin. And I'm thinking, and Dr. Kraft, I was like, I don't know about this. This is kind of crazy. So I had
Yep.
to sit down with Ivor after a conference. I go, hey, so you're an engineer. I'm the one who's going to go to court. If my patient has a heart attack with high LDL cholesterol, no one understands the science you're talking about. I'm going to be paying a lot of money, right? He's, I'll come testify for you. But he said, do this for me, Brian. Go back to your practice and check fasting insulin level on all your patients who have had a heart attack, bypass surgery, or multiple stents. Like,
Yep.
okay. So I go back and I check, start ordering I was like, holy cow, that was the biggest correlation I had. Tons of people with normal LDL cholesterols were having cardiac issues, right?
Yep.
So, and people with normal A1Cs, but their insulin was high.
Yep.
And you
Yep.
go, wow, they're not diabetic, because we all know the biggest risk factor for cardiovascular disease is diabetes, right? Diabetes complications, all these things you and I have been treating all these years. And that's why it's so frustrating when people say, no, I'm not going to check an insulin on you, which is probably the most important marker. There was a study out of Colombia that showed if your insulin's high, you have a 700% increased risk of cardiovascular disease. LDL made no difference in that study, right?
Yep. Exactly. And so that's why we wrote the book, Common Sense Labs, is not only does it tell you what labs that you need, depending on your symptoms, like, you got fatigue, here's the labs to ask for. But it also has the kind of a paragraph for each lab test. If your doctor says you don't need a fasting insulin, why would you want that? There's an answer in Common Sense Labs. Here's the reason. And then the next thing doctors usually say is, oh, your insurance won't even pay for that. Well, we've got the ICD-10 codes in there. If your doctor says that your insurance won't pay for a fasting insulin, here are the ICD-10 codes that will get a fasting insulin paid for with most insurances. And so, armed with that, the average person, so he's a truck driver, she's a waitress, whatever, they don't know anything about any of this. They just know Dr. Berry said, I need my fasting insulin. And so now they're armed and they can take this in and go, no, yeah, we'll pay for it. Use this ICD-10. And the doc's like, who are you? How do you even know about ICD-10? I don't, what is going on here? But in many cases, what the patients have found is when their fasting insulin does come back and it's elevated, and the doc's like, how did you know it was going to be elevated? Well, because blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
then they wind up teaching their doctor. And then now their doctor's checking fasting insulins on all these other people, whereas before they refused to check it because it wouldn't show anything of usefulness.
Yeah, there's a huge medical group, in California. I think it's throughout the United States. They refuse to check an insulin level. So I thank them. I go, keep that policy, because 60% of my patients are your patients. They're
Yep.
coming to me to help. Can you check an insulin? Can you check a coronary calcium score? Can you? They refuse to absolutely check. It's like, I'll be glad to check it. Come see me. We'll check it. You know how much a cash pay for insulin is at my clinic? $12.95.
Nice.
I'm not doing, but Ulta Labs, the cash pay for Quest, $12.95 for an insulin.
So
Probably the
worth
most important thing is, like, you guys want to pay $12 for a test just because they don't know what
so
to do with it, right?
so worth it. And when one doctor doesn't know the power of a fasting insulin, it just makes sense. He just hasn't been exposed to Dr. Linsky's yet. He just doesn't know better. But when an entire $1 billion insurance corporation doesn't want anybody checking fasting insulins, at that point, it's hard for me not to put my tinfoil hat on at that point and go, wait, what? Are you talking about, what is it, Kaiser? Is that who refuses?
May or may not be, but I would say that's a good guess.
I'm not in California, so I don't care.
Well,
But
me either. I'm in Arizona right now at the
yeah, I don't
moment,
take
so
insurance, so they can all kiss my ass. But
me either.
they're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Why would they have a blanket policy? Don't check fasting insulins. That's a little weird, right, Brian?
It makes no sense. I mean, the only thing I can think of is when I left my old HMO, right? The head guy sat down with me. We were talking. He goes, Brian, are you having a midlife crisis? Why are you leaving? I know how much money you're making. I go, look, I can't take it anymore. I'm trying to help my patients. I'm working 18-hour days. I'm killing myself. And you guys send me letters if I check an insulin. I go, do you realize I've taken 11 people or helped 11 people come off insulin in 6 months? Do you know how much that saves your system in bypass surgery, dialysis, blindness, wounds, amputations, all this stuff? And he says, you're costing us money. I said, how can I possibly be costing you money by preventing illness? They said, well, once they get that diagnosis of diabetes, we get paid way more money from Medicare. And you go, do you know Medicare is going broke, right? Shouldn't we be like, that's like saying, should we blow up our engine or check the oil? Like, don't check the oil, Ken. Just let them blow up their engine. You know how much we get paid for an engine transplant? Right.
Yeah, the incentives for doctors and insurance companies have become so perverse that it's becoming impossible for doctors to do their jobs. And with some recent things you and I were talking about that are happening in California now, I would not be surprised if there's not a mass exodus of doctors and healthcare providers out of California into other states. I just want to tell all you California doctors, Tennessee's great, but also there's Texas and Arizona. There's other places. You guys don't all have to come to Tennessee.
Yeah. No, all my friends are in Tennessee. I came a little shorter distance to Arizona, but crazy enough, one of my old partners sought me out today. We just met today, and she's like, "Hey, we should do something here." And she's vegan. She's more. I'm like, we have a different approach, but we both agree on helping the patient and doing what can we do to help patients cut out processed food. We can all agree on that, and then you can
Yep.
follow the carnivore spectrum or more on the vegetarian. As long as you're getting a good protein source. But it's a hard thing because us docs, when we were training, go, oh yeah, vegan diet has to be the most healthy diet,
Right.
right? I mean, it just makes sense from all we know about heart disease and blocked arteries and all that. And then crazy Sean Baker comes along, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a gimmick. Let's see what his coronary calcium score is. Then I'll pass judgment. It was 0. I'm like, oh crud, man, that's
Yep.
incredible, right? So you
Yep.
start seeing that, and I hear you out here saying, yeah, mostly animals that have a little veg if you want, and you start saying this is the exact opposite of what we've been told our entire medical career. And that's why doctors, I think it's hard to say, have I been wrong all this time? Like I've been spouting out all this garbage, and how do I go back? And that's why lies my doctor told me, right? Tells us like they didn't know. They didn't know they were lying. We didn't know we were lying. We weren't telling the truth, but we were telling the truth as we knew it, right? We were just wrong.
Yep. And I think the fasting insulin test, that is the Achilles heel for doctors who still recommend a plant-based or vegan diet. And so I'm about to start a Twitter campaign. When some doctor
Good man.
recommends this, I'm going to say, hey, why don't you just pick 10 random patients who are eating a vegan or plant-based diet and check their fasting insulin and report back. Because all I believe in my heart that 99.9% of doctors are well-meaning, they're ethical, they're moral, they want to help people. They in many cases they're misled, they're misinformed, they've been lied to, and they bought it because they're just dudes and chicks, just like me and Brian. They can't help it. They're just as susceptible to the fallacies of logic and to the message, the narrative. They're just as susceptible as we are. And so if you can get a vegan doctor, a vegan cardiologist, a vegan whatever to start checking fasting insulin, that's going to be such a level of cognitive dissonance. They won't know what to do with that.
Not only that, I'll tell you that the biggest that with the ones who attack us the most, I use a lot of continuous glucose monitor. I think it's one of the best things I have at
Yep.
my. You put a vegan on a continuous glucose monitor. Go and have your orange juice for breakfast and your smoothie at lunch and see what your sugar is doing and what your insulin response is to that. And get back to me if we're all in agreement that elevated insulin is a huge issue.
Yeah, I can't wait till we've got a continuous insulin monitor. That it'll be
Oh
over at that
yeah,
point. If anybody even tries to say that ketovore, carnivore is not the way, and we got a continuous glucose slash insulin monitor on a patient, all the patients are going to call bullshit immediately because a lot of patients they spike their insulin so high that they don't really have as big of a blood sugar spike, right? They're able to tamp it down very quickly, but those people are good. They're the ones who are going to have a fasting insulin of 80 or 90, and there's no doctor on the planet that's not going to go, dang, that's really high. Let me look into this a little bit. Wonder what happens if you have hyperinsulinemia, and then they start looking at the research, and before you know it, they're on your podcast. Because if you're a good moral ethical doctor who really is committed to helping people, you're not going to let people run around with a fasting insulin of 80 or 90 or higher. You're just going to know that there's no way that's healthy. That's got to be bad.
well, and that's the other problem, and that's why having Common Sense Labs, your book, is helpful because even though the lab value says that's normal, there's so many things that the lab values, like they're looking at sick diabetic, pre-diabetic
Right,
people. We're
right.
talking about 93% of the population being metabolically sick. So if you're in that normal range, you don't want to be in that normal range,
Yeah.
right?
And even LabCorp and Quest, their cutoff is about 25. It's
Yeah,
above
for insulin, that's
25. They're going to call it,
insane.
yeah, they're going to call it abnormal. Above 25, I think, is what the cutoff is. And, me and you, I want everybody's fasting insulin to be under 10 and getting close to 5. That's where I want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
But if a vegan doc checks a fasting insulin and it's above 25, that's bolded on the lab results. And doctors have to deal with bolded numbers. You got to put your initials by that. And now all of a sudden they're going, crap, what do I do with this elevated insulin level?
Well, the other problem is I've heard a lot of people make the argument every single person should have a continuous glucose monitor. I say, well, here's the problem. If they're not like Ken and me and Tro and Jason Fung who understand the response is exercise raises your sugar. Should you not exercise? Right.
Right.
Sleeping poorly, all these other things, stress raises your sugar. I've seen all this stuff clinically and it's amazing. But The problem is the standard doctor's going to say, oh, every day at 12 o'clock, your sugars go crazy. Oh, you need more insulin at 12 o'clock, right? You need more of this drug. And you might, instead of saying, okay, what are you doing at 12 o'clock to make your sugars go up? Why don't we address that problem, right?
Yep. Yeah, and so you're exactly right. There'd be doctors who'd be like, "Oh, we need to get your turn your insulin pump up." I don't know how you deal with that except just let the message keep seeping out into the public, and because I think at this point we're getting very close to a tipping point where the tide's going to start to turn, and they keep trying to find a new molecule. Now it's ApoB and LP little a. For a minute there, it was going to be TMAO, but then that played out real quick. And it's so funny how they're AGEs for a minute. It's like, oh yeah, if you're eating, when you grill your meat, it's like, dude, your stomach acid breaks those up. Okay, those never make it into your circulation. It's the AGEs your body's creating. That's the problem. And what makes you glycate? Oh, sugar. Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, but and so it won't be another year or two or three before you'll never hear anything else about ApoB. Peter Attia will be talking about something else in 2 or 3 years because you're not going to be able to hang your hat on that.
And that's the problem is we've hung our hats on so many things. And you go, another one that we could talk about a bit is the lean mass hyperresponder studies that's just coming out. You go, these guys have super elevated LDL cholesterol. They're thin, healthy, metabolically healthy. Are they
Yep.
having coronary disease?
Yep. Yeah. And so the lean mass hyperresponder, I'm going to make some predictions for the first time publicly on your podcast. Initially Dave Feldman, both of our mutual friend, great guy, he was lean, and that's why he put lean mass in there. And so what I predict is going to happen, I don't think it matters if you're lean or not. I think that a certain subset of the population are just hyper responders. If you feed them a high fat, low carb diet, they're going to hyper respond and have very high LDL cholesterol. I don't think, regardless, if you control for their obesity, I think they're going to have the same zero response to the high LDL as everybody else. That's my prediction. There's no research proving that yet. That's a hypothesis. But I think that Dave and Nick Norwitz and Budoff, I think their research studies that they got several more in the pipeline coming. Right, there's two coming that are just going to blow up the lipidologist's brains inside their cranium. It's going to be a pleasure to watch on Twitter. But they're opening the door. They're basically moving Overton's window, so you'll be able to actually have a conversation about this without sounding like a kook. At that point, that's when all hell's going to break loose because it's like, okay, how come some people who are obese, they go on keto? About a third of people, their LDL goes down. About a third of people, it stays the same. About a third,
especially if they're morbidly obese with a lot of visceral fat, right? We see their CRPs, like you're saying, dropping and inflammatory markers.
Absolutely right. Their inflammation's getting better. Their diabetes is getting better. Their blood pressure's getting better, but their LDL went way up high. That's going to become very, very important. And it's not going to be important because it's very dangerous. It's going to be important because I think that definitely is going to turn out to be a global phenotype. I don't know if it has an associated genotype or not yet. I'm still trying to figure that out because that's a doozy. But this is going to be a global phenotype, and I think that this subset of patients who are hyper responders, we're going to wind up treating them differently than we do other patients in several different ways. Whether they're lean or not, I don't think that's going to wind up mattering in the long term.
Why do you think there's so much anger and resentment and bitterness from the standard guys who are seeing what Dave's doing? Why do you think that is? Why do you think these guys don't say, well, let me keep an open mind, let me look, and like what we did with Sean Baker, you sit back and go, okay, Sean, let's see what happens, right? You die of a heart attack at 42. Okay, yeah. Your idea is not very good, right?
Yeah, there's this concept called being blinded by the moments. And so we live in our moment right now, right? And if you're not a student of history, you don't realize that this has happened multiple times in history. It's like, the election coming up in 2024. Everybody's scared to death, like we've never had any kind of craziness like this. This has never happened before. And I'm just sitting back going, you haven't read much history, have you?
Yeah.
Probably the dirtiest, most contentious election ever was Adams versus Jefferson. Okay. It makes what's happening now kind of look a little bit lame. But the same is true in medicine. Anytime there's a new idea that comes to the forefront that is completely opposed to the status quo and the accepted consensus, right? There's a huge flare up. There's huge fights that have many times led to physical contact between doctors.
Semmelweis
Yes, I mean, poor
said, "Wash
Semmelweis
your
was
hands." They go,
he
this
was
crazy nutcase.
committed. He was committed to an insane asylum, and they beat him so badly that his wounds got infected, probably from the same bacteria that was infected in the poor women in childbirth. He died in the asylum, but he was right. This is not the first time this has happened, and so the fact that they're attacking Dave Feldman and Nick Norwitz and Sean Baker and me and you, that's normal. That's just how it happens. It's not how it should happen. I agree. It's not optimal, but that's just how human society progresses. We when you go against the status quo, you're going to meet some friction, and you shouldn't be surprised by that if you're a student of history.
Professor Tim Noakes, Gary Fettke, right?
Yeah,
And these guys came out thinking, how crazy is this? You're going after a doctor, for discussing nutrition. They're saying doctors aren't supposed to give nutritional advice. I don't know if they read the Hippocratic Oath that says, yeah, nutritional advice, give nutritional advice first, do no
sure,
harm, all these things. And you
sure.
go, wow, how in the heck is this happening? But when you're a threat to the system, people don't like that,
Yeah,
right?
I feel bad for medical students, for residents, for young endocrinologists, young internal medicine, young family medicine, young pediatricians, because they are so screwed right now, paradigm wise. And here's why. Back in the early days, when the American Heart Association, made the $1 million deal with Crisco and started saying, "Oh, you need to eat no saturated fats. You need all the carbs are fine. Just don't eat saturated fat. Don't eat cholesterol." Back then, when they would publish in journals, Brian, they would say, "There's really no evidence proving this, but we think this is probably the better way to eat." But as you know, as a student of history, the next generation comes and the next generation comes of doctors, they don't know all that history. And so now a new doc just coming in is like, it's self-evident that a plant-based low-fat diet, what I have to recommend. They don't realize that the American Diabetes Association recommended diet has never not only been proven to be the optimal diet for diabetics, it's never been proven to be safe for diabetics with rigorous research. That has never been proven. The DASH diet has actually been disproven to be the best diet to lower blood pressure. There's a head-to-head diet with keto, and keto kicked the DASH diet's ass. But the American Heart Association is still recommending the DASH diet for people with hypertension and heart disease. And every young doctor coming up in training, who's going to argue with the AHA, right? They don't understand that initially the doctors, the experts, the leading authorities are saying, we have no idea, but we think that a low fat, high carb diet, lots of grains, lots of vegetables, we think that's the healthiest diet. But with each generation, when the new publications would come out, they didn't keep saying that. Now it's considered, oh, this is proven. And when you tell a pediatrician, the diet you're recommending, that handout that you're giving people, you understand there's not a single rigorous trial that has proven that to be safe for human children. And they look at you like you're from Mars. They're
And
like,
it's amazing. It
it
is
says
amazing.
American Academy of Pediatrics right here on it, AAP. I'm like, yeah, but it's never been proven not only optimal, it's never been proven safe for long-term consumption in human children. And they're
Well,
like, they're mine.
and one of the big ones for me too was Dr. Unwin out in the UK. His patient is like morbidly obese. He hasn't seen her, and he went to see her one last time to get her sugars under control. And the last time he saw her, he gave her the ADA's recommended diet and says, "Here's what you have to do." And then she comes back. She wasn't coming back, and then finally he drags her in, and she loses 100 pounds. Her sugars are everything's great. And he said, "What did you do?" "Well, doctor, I stopped listening to your advice and I started eating like my mom did. And I started eating eggs and bacon and butter and all this. And I lost all this weight and I don't need my insulin anymore. And I feel great, And so he starts having more and more patients doing this. And they're saying how every front page of the newspaper, how dangerous this guy is. Then he wins doctor of the year, a couple of years later. And you think, how in the world can you have that much clinical success? Right. So that's the one thing. And that's why we started Low Carb MD, is to say, okay, if we're just the only ones doing this, then we're two guys who are just going to get picked off. But if you have thousands of doctors around the world saying, yeah, I'm doing the same thing and my patients are getting better. And my patient, like the standard of care has to change at some point because it
Yeah.
sucks right now, right?
Yeah, and it's already changing. The American Diabetes Association already accepts a low carb diet as long as it's a Mediterranean style low carb diet. They're totally fine with it. But here's the problem. That's on page 187 of their guidelines, right? The average endocrinologist has no clue that the ADA says that a low carb diet's fine now. They have no idea. The average family doctor, the average internist, they don't know that because the American Diabetes Association forgot to hold a press conference, Brian, and say, look, all that bashing we were doing on low carb and keto, well, turns out we were wrong. It's now part of the guidelines. It's way back in the bag, but it's in there. And so a low carb option is absolutely a viable. You're in compliance. You are following the guidelines if you recommend a low carb diet for your patients with prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, type 2, type 1, LADA, MODY. You're within the guidelines prescribing a low carb diet for them. And in the low carb space, like you and I are, we're kind of in a bubble. We don't realize if you just went out and randomly surveyed 1,000 doctors who take care of diabetic patients. Okay. What's your prediction? How many out of 1,000, if you said you think low carb is safe for diabetic patients to eat, out of those 1,000 endocrinologists, family docs, internists, what percentage would say, yeah, low carb is fine, it's in the guidelines?
Less than 1%.
Yeah, I would. And
If
you're
that.
probably right. Yeah, and I would say, yeah, I bet $1,000 it'd be less than 10% would
Yeah.
even know that it's in the guidelines.
Of the endocrinologists I know,
Right.
0% on the most part, right? I know a couple of docs who get it, but it's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing, especially if you're seeing clinical benefits. So I'll say, you know what? So I have with the cardiologist, they'll have a patient who has 3 stents in. I'll go, okay, let me take that patient. We do low carb, we cut out the processed food, we, add in some omega-3s, we do this stuff. All of a sudden they're off their insulin, all their meds are getting better, everything's getting better. And then the cardiologist sends me a note, says, oh, he lost weight, so his numbers are getting better. I'm like, no,
Right.
he dropped
All
his
about the
insulin.
obesity. Yeah. Yeah. Check his fasting insulin, doctor. Then you'll know why he's better.
Yeah, and
Yep.
it's crazy. And like you're saying, that would, as a matter of fact, that would be a great experiment, a great research to look at. It's like we obesity is one thing, right? You could be obese and metabolically healthy. I've seen people that are 400 pounds that have normal insulin, normal triglycerides, because they can store fat like crazy. Who cares if
Yep.
if it's locked up right in the storage unit somewhere?
Yep.
So if you take those people and say, is LDL an issue or not? And I think we're talking about like the large buoyant LDL that our body's making versus the stuff that's stuck with a bunch of sugar and insulin that's causing all kinds of issues, right? So okay, is LDL itself or is it the organism it's in or the environment it's in? Right. So LDL, if I have a diabetic with an A1C of 10 and their LDL is high, it scares the heck out of me. I'll do everything I can to, but we got to fix the diabetes problems also. Right. I mean, for sure. I mean, that's your first priority. So
Sure.
that's what I think what people don't understand is you throw some like the problem is, and I think it's as doctors want to be like the priest or something, like you're forgiven. Okay, go back and do what you're doing. Then I'll forgive you again next week. Just keep coming back to me instead of saying, hey, look, if I put you on the statin drug to lower your LDL cholesterol, it's going to raise your insulin levels, going to raise your sugar. That puts you at higher risk. So shouldn't we be saying, okay, if I'm going to put you on a statin, you got to cut your carbohydrate intake and
100%.
exercise and watch your stress and get sleep and stop smoking,
Yeah.
all these other things that are common sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And so a lot of patients in our private group, they bump up against the doctor's cognitive dissonance. Like they'll have an A1C of 6.4, right? And you and I know how bad that is. And their LDL will be 1 point high, 1 point above the official normal. Okay. The doctor spends 10 minutes talking about the LDL and try to get them on Repatha or Praluent or, at least Crestor if you don't want to do that. And don't even mention that they're severely pre-diabetic. And the patients are like, but you said in your video that having diabetes is 10 times more dangerous than having elevated LDL. And I said, yeah, that's right. That's the research is very clear about that. LDL cholesterol on the hierarchy of what's the thing most likely to make you have a heart attack. Type 2 diabetes, far and away, right? LDL cholesterol is number 13 or 14 on the list of things. Spent the entire doctor visit doctor talking about LDL.
We have a hammer for that. We have a nail. We have a hammer to hit that nail, that LDL,
Yeah, how is
but we
that
don't have one for
possible?
lifestyle.
That's right. And it's because of the way the doctors are trained. And then back to medical history again, a long time ago, there were two theories of medicine. One was the germ model, and the other was the terrain model. Now, when it comes to bacteriology, the germ model is going to win. Yes, absolutely. But when it comes to chronic disease, so many doctors, if you start talking terrain model with them, they're like, "Oh, you probably believe in water ionizers and this and that's." Like, no, I don't believe in any of that. But I do know that it's very important how healthy a person's body is, how hyperinsulinemic they are, how inflamed they are. That stuff's really damn important. And for you to just think, "Oh, I'm going to write this magic prescription and that's going to fix everything," and just ignore the terrain of the patient, it's maddening almost. It's like, because these doctors are very smart, but when they get into that little narrow niche, it's so easy for them to ignore an A1C of 6.4 and then just bust the patient's balls for 20 minutes about this LDL that's 1 point high.
Yeah, and it's just crazy, like all these things, and it's so funny because you think about it. As a matter of fact, one of my patients, he's done great. He's down 60 pounds, off all of his meds, blood pressure, everything's great. He's like the country song backwards, right? He goes, you know what? We started talking about it, and he goes, he's looking at the stuff he can eat. He's like, oh my gosh. He said his family owns a bunch of Mexican restaurants in San Diego, and he goes, you're not going to believe this, doc, but no one in my family was overweight or had diabetes until my dad, who owns all these restaurants, said, there's no more lard in the but we don't use any lard. We use vegetable oil only. He said we put that in all of our food and all of us got fat and all of us got diabetic. He goes, you got to be kidding me, right? If we use lard, we'd be better. And it's like, to us, it's like, lard, are you kidding me? Right? It sounds so
Yeah,
crazy, but they did better when they were using that kind of fat than using
sure,
vegetable oil, right?
sure, absolutely. And
And
I think,
Indians are doing the same thing. People from India who come over are putting vegetable oil in instead of ghee, and they're all having heart attacks. And they go, oh, I wonder
yep,
why.
yep. And that's why the get rid of the vegetable oils, that was one of my three first things I started talking about back in 2017 when I started this YouTube, Facebook, internet thing that I do. Was like, get rid of all the sugar, get rid of all the grains, get rid of all the vegetable seed oils. That was the first three things. And it's still the first three things I tell people to this day. Those are your three enemies. Those
Vinny
are,
Torturage, right? NSNG, right? All those kind of
yeah,
things.
yeah,
Saying,
yeah, yeah. And so NSNG and the oils, get rid of the
mm-hmm.
vegetable oils.
Yeah.
That's it. And you know what, Brian, for 75% of people who are pre-diabetic, obese, whatever, metabolic disease, 75% of them will go back to normal if they just did step one, two, and three.
Yeah. And
Most
then,
of them, most people don't have to go 20 total grams of carb keto or ketovore
yeah,
or
exactly.
carnivore. Most people don't have to do that to have metabolic health.
Yeah, Dr. Lustig was just talking about that on the Huberman Lab podcast. Excellent podcast for anyone listening. And so, they were discussing all those things. He goes, look, if you could just eat real food, okay, if you're going to eat fruit, just don't drink fruit juice, right?
Yep,
Where can we
yep.
make those changes? Can we start cutting back on this stuff where you're getting this massive insulin response? And the other thing that comes to mind, Ben Bickman and I were on a panel together, and I go, okay, Ben, if you could pick one thing, if you could have a high LDL or a high insulin, which one do you pick? He goes, oh, Bryce starts laughing. I thought he was going to say, well, it just depends. He goes, no. He goes, I'll take a high LDL any day of the week.
Same.
Any day of the week,
Absolutely.
right?
Well, I just got my labs back. I'm going to post all my labs. Nisha got hers too. We're going to post them all in our private group and let every, I had 24 vials, Brian. You ever seen somebody get 24? Because
You
every
and Dave
single
Feldman,
test
man.
that every vegan influencer is like, I'd love to know what your fill in the blank is. I put it on the list. And so for 2 years, I've been compiling this list, and I've got everything: tumor necrosis, factor alpha, IL-9, IL-6, IL-1, IL-2, literally everything that I don't even want to know how much these labs cost me, but I would much prefer to have a high LDL. And my LDL came back about 200. So that's deadly high,
Yeah, you're
right?
just
But my fasting insulin was 7 and my A1C was 5.4. So I literally, if you said, "Oh,
Rob
would you?"
Seibus says you're on death's doorstep right now. Rob is super strict, right? He's
Yeah, yeah,
super
yeah,
strict.
yeah.
If
And
your
and
insulin's above
I,
1, you're gonna die.
yeah,
Come on,
no,
Rob.
I think I'm
Yeah,
going to be around for a while, but I'm not
yeah.
concerned at all that my LDL's high. I literally could not possibly care less that my LDL is high.
Yeah, that's the thing, is looking at the big picture. Your triglycerides are probably great, other than if you have a
Yeah,
little scotch here and there.
80.
80. Yeah. So you
Yeah,
start looking at that, and those are the big picture. HDL, like you look at HDL as a marker of
55.
55, great for a guy,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
there's these people with the LDL of 100, but their HDL is 20. Their cardiac risk factor is through the roof when you look at the data, right? And that's the thing,
absolutely.
is when you focus on one variable, right? You don't just look at one thing. It's like saying, how much money do you make? Can you afford to live in Nashville? Well, it just depends. How big is your house? Do you have an ex-wife? Do you have a mortgage? Do you owe people money? Do you have, 500,000 in med school loans?
Hmm.
So, all those things, you can't just know one variable. And that's the problem, is people are just, it's just like a stamp. Your LDLs of this, statin.
Yeah,
Then you need insulin. Now you need instead of going, okay, let's think about it. Okay, can we help reverse some of this metabolic stuff? And then it's on the patient. So for me, my job is so much fun now, because my patients go, okay, I'm bought in. I don't have to convert them, right? They're
right.
already my religion now. And now you can say, okay, what works for you in your lifestyle, right? Can we cut back on alcohol? Do you have to drink every night? Can we do it on the weekends? Can we do, those kind of things? And where can we give and take a little bit? And that's what you've always done. And talk about the proper human diet, right?
Yeah,
And that's what's so dumb, is these studies they do. They go, oh, when you give rabbits beef every time they start getting heart problems. Well, do rabbits eat beef? No, they don't have the enzymes to break it. And it's like, so you don't give lions, like lions. It's funny because I have a patient who owns a lions, tigers, and bears place. And she said, the lions will not eat junk food. You can put blueberry muffins on. If you give it to a bear, they eat it all. They'll
oh yeah,
they get
definitely.
fat, then they go hibernate. The lion goes, I want meat. I'm not going
Yeah,
to eat that. So you can't give a lion a vegan diet and think the lion's going to prosper, right?
exactly. Yeah. And the human beings are the only species on the planet who have forgotten how to eat. We've forgotten, and I don't think we've forgotten. I think we've been misled. I think the big food companies, they know how they can make the highest profit, the highest return. It's with foods made out of sugar, grains, and vegetable seed oils. They're shelf stable. They can put them on a boat, ship them around the world, sit in a warehouse for a year, show up on your grocery shelf. It's just like they were just made, right?
Yeah.
That's how they make their profit. You can't make 1,000% markup on meat. It's just not, even if you're processing the meat and turning it into spam or something, you're still not going to make the markup that Kellogg's and Post and Kraft Heinz makes on the processed foods made out of sugar, grains, vegetable seed oils. That's where
Yeah.
the profit's at.
Yeah. My friend owns a bunch of Italian restaurants. He goes, you want to really make me cry? I go home and cry. If you come to my restaurant, because what I do is when I go to a restaurant, I get a steak, right?
Yep.
He goes, if you come to my restaurant, you have a steak and water, I lose money.
Yeah.
You have a glass of wine and pasta, I do the dance because I'm so happy how much money I made that night, right? Because of the
Absolutely.
markup. But and again, and the other thing and I don't know if you've noticed this too, Ken, is I see people go to Italy, France, Germany, and they tell me what they're eating, and I'm looking at their sugar tracings going, wait a minute, how can this possibly be? You're having pasta and they're not getting that huge spike that
Yep.
we see here if you go to Olive Garden or something, It's
Yep.
amazing. And there has to be something in the processing and how our body's dealing with this insulin. Maybe it's the GMO stuff. I don't know why it is, but I've observed this for the last 5 years. And it's amazing that, eating real food, it might be they're exercising more, and probably they're less stressed because they're on vacation and not dealing with
Probably
their
all
jerk
that.
of a
Yeah.
boss and
And I
everything.
do think on average that European bread and pasta and pizza crust is less bad than American. I absolutely think that's true. I've been to Italy and several other Mediterranean countries. We never had a shortage of meat. Over there, their condiments that sit on the table are olive oil, right? There's no ketchup. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's olive oil. That's the condiment, salt and pepper. That's what you have to. And if you wanted some ketchup, they give you this look like, oh, you
Like,
must be
you're
American.
going to ruin the food. Are you kidding me? Yeah.
Okay, but there was meat everywhere. But I absolutely agree that their bread and wheat and stuff is less bad. But I don't think that makes it good. We see the rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes in Europe are not as high as they are in the U.S., but they are higher than they were 20 years ago, 50 years ago. So yeah, I think it is problematic as well, but not as problematic as
Well,
other.
they're drinking more soda and they're having more processed junk that we're shipping over there to try to kill
Sure,
them too,
sure,
right?
sure,
Like you look
sure.
at what we're seeing in India, in the vegetarian and vegan areas of India, they're having a massive explosion of diabetes. So you can't
Absolutely.
blame the meat in that case. Like
No,
this
absolutely
vegan
not.
doctor from India, we were having this nice discussion. I was trying to just talk sense with him, and I had to block him at one point. I finally, because he was totally bought off by industry, you could tell, right?
Sure.
So,
Sure.
anyways, it was crazy because he goes, just because the meat. I go, what about the vegan areas? Why do they have diabetes? Blocked me, and I blocked. Like, you just
Yeah.
ask a question, like, explain it to me. What else is the factor then? If it's
Yeah.
if they're not eating meat, what's causing it, right?
Yeah. And, now I think people are becoming aware that there's a huge diabetes problem in India. But
And
even
China
just a
too.
few years ago, yeah, China too, right? But a few years ago, those were the two populations that were thrown in my face constantly. Was what about the Asians? What about the Indians? They're so slim, they're so healthy. And my reply back then was, check a fasting insulin.
Yeah,
That'll
fast. Yeah, exactly right.
that'll
No,
tell you
I've seen it.
exactly what's going on.
So many thin people of Indian descent that I've had in my practice are, you're going to get diabetes.
Yep.
I'm telling you what's going to happen.
Yep.
Non-bread and rice and pasta and all this stuff, but they don't get fat because it's not genetically beneficial. So if you can't get subcutaneous fat, which is protective, where does it go? Visceral, and they got a ton of visceral fat. We do Sikas on them, which is a body comp, and you see this huge visceral fat. Even though you look at him and go, oh, that guy's healthy. That healthy guy
Right.
died of a heart attack. Well, he wasn't healthy. His insulin was 38 or 52, right?
Yep. And that's that, like you said earlier, that you've seen some people who are definitely overweight, who are metabolically very healthy, have a normal A1C, normal fasting insulin, normal triglycerides. So really, doctors need to understand, and I really hope some young doctors are listening to this. You got to check a fasting insulin. You can't look at this person and say, oh, they're overweight, therefore, by definition, they're metabolically unhealthy. Well, probably, but not 100%.
Yeah.
Or this person's thin, therefore, they're metabolically healthy.
This
Not
happens all the
close.
time. Doctors,
Not
I'm
even
telling you
close.
all the time, they'll look at you and go, I've had people ask, hey, can I get a fasting insulin? The doctor's like, look at you, you're fine. You don't need that. Their
Right.
insulin comes back 58,
Right.
right? It should be less than 5, right? Less than 10 for sure, less than 5 if
Yep.
you want to, fast or anything. So yeah,
Yep.
it's pretty crazy, like, how people, I don't know. I'm like, let's see, because you may have diabetes just because you don't make enough insulin. Let's look at that, right? So a lot of people,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
I can't tell you, since I've been promoting fasting insulins, I bet I've had 30 people reach out to me, Brian, and say, you know what happened? I almost killed my doctor because they diagnosed me 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years ago with diabetes. And I was in my 30s or 40s, right? And so they said, you're type 2 diabetic. And these are people who were on 4 different diabetic medications by mouth and injecting insulin and still had an A1C of 9. And they're like, dude, I promise I'm eating pretty damn good here. I'm not perfect, but I'm doing okay. Why my blood sugar still 300? And I'm like, did they check a fasting insulin? No, they check it. It's 0.1. They're type 1 diabetic, and they were misdiagnosed because they were a late bloomer,
and
right?
on the
Quote
opposite
unquote.
side, I have at least 3 patients in my practice that were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes because their sugar was 400. They go in with DKA in the hospital, all this stuff, and they get diagnosed as type 1. Well, keep following them, get them on a low carb diet, get all this stuff started. And guess what? Let's get a C-peptide, which I know you're a
Yep.
favorite.
Yep. Yep.
You're making insulin. You're not
Yeah.
type 1. You're making good
No.
insulin,
Yeah,
right?
I've
You were
seen that
just,
as well. Yeah.
yeah.
And so by a patient being empowered to know, ask for the fasting insulin, ask for a C-peptide if you're currently injecting insulin. Boom, immediately are you making insulin or not? Because that's a pretty damn important question, isn't it? If you're a diabetic, you kind of need to know, are you
And
type 1, type 2?
yeah, and the solution, that the thing is too, that you and Sean Baker and a lot of people are talking about, the importance of muscle mass. What I see is people come in, even if they're 250 pounds, if they have a lot of muscle mass, their visceral fat is very low because
Yep.
muscle mass is inhibited, and plus you need less insulin to get sugar into the muscle. So it's amazing. I see people, I'm like, I kind of already know what their insulin is going to be based on their body composition, or if I have their insulin triglycerides, I know what their body composition is going to be. So
Yep.
they kind of, it's nice to have both, is just because I haven't seen an exception to that rule. If you have a lot of visceral fat, you're going to have a high CRP, you're going to have a high triglycerides, high insulin levels, right? If you have
Yep.
very little visceral fat, but you weigh 350 pounds, you're all these things can be normal markers. And you go, okay, it's not, it's more of a mechanical thing. Is like, okay, carrying around 350 pounds is going to hurt your joints and heart, kidneys and all
Yep.
this. But from a metabolic standpoint, it's like saying, okay, we got to just work on, lifestyle and exercise and activity and all those kind of things. So it's amazing. You're right. The importance of labs. Any other labs in your book that you go, okay, here's some stuff that people should ask for?
Yeah, the full thyroid panel. That's
Yeah.
another thing that drives me insane. Is the average doctor will check if a patient goes in and says, "Doc, I'm fatigued. I can't lose weight." I looked up on the internet and it says my eyebrows being thin out here. That could be a thyroid thing. My periods are irregular, and the doc checks the TSH and says, "No, everything's fine." Well,
Yeah.
maybe a TSH and a total T4. and they're both normal. So therefore, it absolutely is not your thyroid. And these people walk out of there with severe Hashimoto's or with a severe reverse T3 problem. And they're suffering. And this doctor has just effectively said, it's all in your head. Here's some Prozac. There's nothing wrong with your thyroid. Who's the idiot there? I
Yeah,
would say it's the doctor.
yeah, I had a lady too. Same thing. She was fatigued and exhausted and miserable, and her TSH was normal. Her free T3 was like 0.8. It's like, oh my
But
gosh.
nobody checked that.
And she was on
It's all
levothyroxine.
you.
So the levothyroxine was keeping the TSH down, but she was getting no T3. She couldn't convert the
Exactly.
high cortisol, high stress, high insulin, all this
Yep.
stuff. So,
Yep. Yep.
we start putting the whole picture together. That's why it's so frustrating. Like, how many people are walking around miserable every day? Plus, if you're like that, you're going to gain more weight because you don't feel like exercise, you have no energy, and you're miserable and you're depressed and so many people like that, you go, oh, if we get Ken's book and you figure out what your lab should be, you go, doctor, this isn't normal. I want this lab. And they can read this guy's book, right? And take it in. I'm sure a lot of doctors hate you right now, right?
I'm sure a lot of docs hate me and you. But the last chapter in
As long as
life,
our patients love us, that's all that matters, right?
100%. I could
Yeah.
all the doctors out there can kiss my ass.
I haven't got any,
I
I don't get
literally
any.
don't care. I do care if one patient is mistreated or misdiagnosed. I do care about that very, very much. The last chapter in Lies My Doctor Told Me, it's for doctors. It is written especially for doctors. It's even broken up in how many years you've been practicing. This is what you need to focus on, okay? Because as I've went through those development stages of being a doctor, right? You're in residency, you're in your first 5 years, you're in your second 5 years. You look at things differently. In your first 5 years, you're scared to death you're going to miss something. You're reading everything you can get your hands on. You're going to conferences. But that second 5 years, you're like, I pretty much got this figured out. And then after 10 years of practice, you're like, don't even tell me anything. I know everything. And those are very often the younger doctors are much, much safer doctors and also much easier to work with because they're not old and set in their ways and think they know it all.
Yeah, but then there's the older doctors with clinical experience like you and I who've been sitting around going, okay, wait a minute, this isn't working, right? Well, I don't care what the literature says, it's not working. And then we have enough courage in our clinical skills to say, okay, let's try something different, see, and then they get better and you go, oh, it's working. Oh, let's try on someone else and see. But this whole thing where, you know, uh, you have to, like, for instance, the lean mass hyperresponders issue. How long do you have to wait for studies to be done when you go, all these people are clinically getting better, they're coming off their meds, their diabetes is better, their mood's better, they're not depressed anymore, they don't want to kill their husband every day, all those kind of things. And you go, okay, these are beneficial things. And the crazy thing is now the literature is finally catching up with it. But Tro and I, 4 or 5 years ago now, we're saying it's weird. My depressed patients seem happier. They're having more energy. They're laughing more. And these doctors were attacking us for 3 or 4 days saying, you should lose your license. Food has nothing to do with mood,
Yeah.
nothing to
Yeah.
do with it. Right.
Yeah.
So eat
It's
some
funny.
jalapenos and see what happens if you eat too
It's
many
funny what
habaneros.
returning a patient's fasting insulin back to normal will do and lowering their levels of chronic inappropriate inflammation. It's almost like magic, but it's not magic. It's just physiology. But many doctors, we took physiology in our first 2 years of med school, but then for the rest of our medical career, nobody talks about physiology. The only thing anybody wants to talk about is pharmacology.
Yeah, that's the thing is how many drugs can you prescribe? Do you know the side effects? All those things. And,
Yeah.
and all of us know if we can deprescribe and get people off meds, you have all these side effects. There's no drug that doesn't have side effects.
Right. And
Aspirin,
when you
Tylenol.
add a drug, so if
Yeah,
a patient is taking one drug and you add a second drug, you
compounds
don't
it.
add the side effects are not additive, they're multiplicative. And so
Mhm.
when you add that third medicine, it's 100% chance they're going to have a complication or a side effect. And then you see people come in and they're on 15 different medications from 7 different doctors. And it's like, I don't even know how you're not dead. I don't even know how you're able to still drive a car taking this much prescription medications with the thousands of interactions that are going on in your body each and every day. It's almost a testament to the resilience of the human organism that we're able to tolerate the pharmaceutical abuse that so many patients are submitted to.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's it. Like you're talking about, hey, once you get hit for your new book, right, kicking ass after 50, right? So, like, what's the big nugget, like 1 minute bullet of saying, hey, who should read this book and why is it important?
So if you're approaching 50 and you don't want to act like the average 50-year-old that you know, or if you're 50 or older and you're like, Yeah, I don't really want to just lay on the couch all day and watch football. You don't have to. Basically, at the age of 50, that's when you've got the wisdom and the experience and the accumulated knowledge. You should be kicking ass in every arena of your life. Literally, you should be the king of everything you do at work, in the gym, at home, in the bedroom. I mean, you should be the man or the woman.
Mhm.
It's written for men, but everything we talk about in the book is applicable to women as well. There's no reason for you're not done at 50. You're just getting started if you're doing it right. And that's what we try to help people understand is there's a right way to do this where you can literally be the king. And because you've got seniority now, you should be the boss and be the boss man or boss woman, but you can't do that if you're hyperinsulinemic and chronically inflamed and
Can't tie your
chronically
shoes.
stressed
You can't
and
get up.
tired
You
and
don't want to go
can't, yeah,
outside.
not
Yeah,
only
all that.
you can't tie your shoes, you also can't see anything under your belly. That's no way to live the second half of your life.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, for me, one of the questions I ask patients the first time I meet with them, I was like, "What do you do for fun? What do you enjoy?" And so many people look at me like I'm just surviving. I'm just trying to get through
Yep.
surviving. And at some point, maybe when I retire, I'll have fun. I don't know. So people are that have passion. You see that they're younger, right? They have something they enjoy or
100%.
something that
Yeah.
gets them out of bed. They go, "I want to go do this. I want to climb this mountain, or I want to go write this book, or whatever you're gonna do." It's
Yeah.
it's just
That's
amazing.
one of the ways that when you practice medicine like you and I do, that's one of the ways you're really having an effect is they're re-engaged. They're actually looking, they're curious again. They want to learn, they want to read a book, they want to learn a new hobby. They want to go see relatives they haven't seen in years. They want to actually go to their high school reunion as opposed to ignoring it again for the 20th time. They're curious and they're interested in life again. And I think that is the sine qua non of being a Homo sapien is that you're curious and you're active and you're vigorous and you want to know and you want to do. And if anybody's listening to this and they're like, well, I don't want to do shit but lay on the couch and you watch football, that's not normal. Okay. That should not be your life. Your life could be so much more, but you gotta fix yourself metabolically. And then the mental health just comes with that.
Yeah, and you could walk on the treadmill and watch football too, Go to the gym and
Yeah.
watch football, do whatever you're gonna do. And that's the thing, or fast forward through it real quick and whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think those are all key things. So let me ask you this first. I know I've asked you this before. And it's okay if the answer changed from last time because it does for a lot of people, but what's life's best medicine for Kinberry? Where do you go when things suck, or where do you get your passion to keep writing books and moving forward and all this stuff? Like what's that for you, life's best medicine?
My happy place is being out in the woods with my chainsaw, with a full battery and my AirPods in, listening to an Audible and learning and actually, working out, but not being in a gym, improving our land, raising our sheep and our chickens and soon to be cattle. Not only preaching a proper human diet, but also now starting to become a producer of proper human food and just living that life out on the farm with the kids. And I'll be out there in the woods, and here come Beckett on his little four-wheeler coming back there to see what I'm doing. And then I come back to the house, and Bonnie's so happy to see me. I mean, it's like heaven here. Like
So
I
man,
literally couldn't ask for anything better.
that's awesome, man. That is so great. If more people live like that, that's what I'm moving closer and closer to as the years go on, and you realize what matters. Like waking up and look at the sunrise, going out for a little hike, going, seeing it snow outside, whatever it is, doing those things that you find passion. So many people just don't have a passion, and they get old, and you ask how old they are, and they're 42, right? It's like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, you got a lot of years left, dude. You better step it up, right? So
Yep.
all these things, man, such wisdom. Thanks so much for joining me. And how do people track you down?
So I've got a little YouTube channel, and I think I've got over 1,000 videos on there now about every different medical condition you can imagine. And so rather than watch them all, just go to YouTube and type in Dr. Berry and then whatever medical condition you have or you're interested in. I probably got a video about that. When I'm feeling especially snarky, you'll find me on Twitter, slapping around the vegans. When I'm feeling loving and helpful, you'll find me on Facebook or Instagram. And then when I'm feeling informative, I'm either writing a book or I'm on making a YouTube video. And then otherwise, you'll find me out in the pasture of the woods.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get your book. It's on Audible too, so I'm gonna get and listen to it on the way
Sweet.
back. I can do that on the way back from Arizona, make my trip either really long or really short. Depends
It'll
on how
be a
good it
quick
is.
trip. Don't worry, you'll
But I'm
love
sure
it.
it'll make it short, man. So yeah, it's good. Congrats on all you're doing, all you're accomplishing, and all the people you're helping. And so many patients come to me and go, "Hey, what do you think of this video from Ken Berry? You've had some great." Well, I show a lot of my patients your videos that you've done. I go, look at this little snippet on cholesterol. Look at this little snippet on this, because you could do it in a unlike me, you could do it in a succinct way where you get the point across and you show the data, and it's mind blowing what you've accomplished. So I appreciate everything you've done. And standing in the storm, I mean, it's not easy to stand up against the whole medical establishment and say they're wrong,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Luckily, we have more friends now who are saying the same thing, but
yeah.
it's a
It's
journey
not
for
as
sure.
lonely as it was, right?
Yeah, it's a lot less lonely, especially go, here's my data, where's yours? Like you
Right.
said, let's look at this fasting insulin, show me your patients, and we'll see who's doing better and who's healthier and enjoying life a lot more. And that's
Absolutely.
one of the things I'll tell you that stunned me. And when Sean Baker first started posting and you were posting stuff, I'm like, you know, I don't know, but I've seen people like Brett Lloyd like go from major depressed, want to kill themselves, and they're happy. It's like, just from eating meat, like how can
Yep.
this possibly be? And it's
Yep.
just amazing. Anyone out there listening, try changing. If you've never tried cutting out soda, cutting out terrible foods, and eat real food, go and don't look for labels, just look for food and make it. Right, do it at home, and you don't have to worry about what they're adding to it. It's amazing. As a matter of fact, uh, uh, keto camp, gosh dang it, why am I blanking? Keto camp.
Oh, Ben.
Yeah, Ben Azadi. Yeah, Ben
Yeah.
Azadi. I'm getting old, man. So Ben Azadi, he has a card that says he's allergic to seed oil, and he goes, "I go to restaurants, I give it to him, and so many places they go, we can't help you." So
Yep.
it tells you it's in everything, right? He goes, "I'm allergic to it, I can't have it." Even olive oil will have seed oil in it. They go, "Oh, you can't have our olive oil here." Right?
Right. Because
So
we
it's
cut it.
amazing.
Yeah.
You learn a lot. So everyone out there, this is gold stuff. I'm so glad to have Dr. Barry on, and be kind to yourself, be kind to others. I think when you feel better and you enjoy life and you're out adventuring, you're less likely to be a jerk and fight with people on Twitter and be miserable and fight with your spouse. So take that into effect. That's really, we're docs. We've been around a while and we've seen stuff and we see who's thriving and who's not. So grab Dr. Barry's books, follow him on YouTube. It's free. And keep plugging along, make this your year, kick ass over 50, right?
That's it, baby. Kick ass. Take names.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information. And hopefully this helps you. Have a great day. And thank you for listening. And thank you for your support.